Hey there. Welcome to Why Healthcare Leaders Resist Compliance and How to Change That. My name is Jay Anstein, and I first want to thank you for taking the time to sign up for this free training. I hope that you find it of value, and if you have any questions at any particular point in time and you want to reach out to me, I'm going to include my contact information as we go forward in this presentation. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started. So just a little bit of background on me. I'm a lawyer by training. I've worked in healthcare for over 25 years. I've worked on the provider and the payer side of the market. I've worked for large organizations consisting of a couple 100,000 employees and a compliance department of over 400, and smaller organizations consisting of 20 employees, where I was the only compliance officer and member of the compliance staff. And so what I'm going to do is take that perspective as we move forward through this particular training. So quick note here, if you do have any questions or you want to connect after the workshop, a couple things. One is I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if we are not already connected, please shoot me a connection request. And you can also direct message me and let me know that you signed up for the free training. You can also email me as well. Okay, so this workshop is for you if you face tension or mistrust from your leaders. Now, in my experience with compliance, we have some perception issues. Before we utter a single word to a healthcare leader, they're going to see us as sort of a grown-up version of a hall monitor. So there is some tension and mistrust from your leaders. That's completely normal. Just know that it's not anything that you've done, but there are some steps that we need to take to try and overcome that sentiment. Also struggling to get engagement or buy-in. Leaders are not responding to you. They're canceling meetings. They're not following through on action items, those kinds of things. Business decisions being made without your input. Business deals, proposals, new partnerships with other providers, opening new service lines. All those kinds of operational things are happening, but you don't have a seat at the table and you're not included in any of those discussions. And that can be problematic as they go forward and they find out that they didn't set something up compliantly, and that can result in things like overpayments or possible breach situations. And then finding out about issues after the fact. They're just not engaging you. They're not proactively coming to you with questions or concerns, and then you're finding out about it on the back end. Now, if any of these sound familiar, my friend, you are not alone. I have gone through each of these and many more numerous times over throughout the course of my career, and that's why you're here. This course is here to help you overcome some of these challenges and change that perception of compliance from obstacle over to business partner. So what you'll learn today is a simple 5-step system that I've developed to change the perception of compliance in your organization. Now, before we dive in, I want to briefly share my story with you so that you know how I learned everything that I'm about to share with you. Several years ago, I found it hard to get leaders to see me like a business partner. I had heard comments like, "You're the Department of No, this is where good ideas go to die, you're just an obstacle to me getting things done," things like that. And so little messes would become big ones, largely because they were not reaching out to me proactively and consulting me, as it related to something that was going on operationally. And it's unfortunate because there's certainly things that could have been avoided. For example, small repayments became large ones, contracts had to be terminated, reporting obligations had to be submitted because of a situation that was avoidable. And so I would hear things like, "Are you crazy? You want us to do what? As I said earlier, you're just an obstacle to us getting stuff done. We've always done it this way." I've heard just about every possible type of comment defensively towards compliance. And so it was a struggle. And for a while, I thought it was only expertise that mattered. I thought, well, I've been through graduate school. I know the regulations. I know how to interpret them. I'm going to dazzle them with my expertise, and they'll just naturally become engaged in the compliance program. Oh, how wrong I was. It was definitely a hot mess. I had assumed that they understood compliance terminology when they did not. And I focused, unfortunately, too much on the rules and not enough on how to make my audience care. And that was problematic. And then I was also just stressed out and overwhelmed and frustrated that my leaders really just didn't seem to care about compliance the way I did. And so I thought about these things and I gave it some thought, and something had happened. I had asked myself a question, and that was why. Why are healthcare leaders so resistant to compliance? And when I thought about that, a few things kind of quickly came to mind that really started to make sense as to why I was getting resistance. The first was just corporate politics. Now, if you know me, I wrote a book a couple years ago called Navigating the Politics of Healthcare, a compliance officer's guide to communication, relationships, and gaining buy-in. That book was written because several years ago, I had worked for a physician-owned entity, and we had physician owners and hospital owners, and there was lots of infighting amongst the different physician groups and lots of politics going on between the various parties, and it really made me realize how political the healthcare industry is, and compliance can get sucked up into that if you're not careful. And so sometimes corporate politics can shape a leader's resistance to compliance. Also, just lack of understanding. This gets back to my comment earlier where I just assumed that they understood the terminology. Turns out they didn't. And so that was something that I realized, okay, that's a knowledge gap here that we really need to close up. Also, ineffective communication skills. Now, I see this quite a bit with newer compliance officers where, essentially with compliance, we have a message of do this or don't do that. And it does take some finesse in certain situations. If you want to get leaders to respond to you, you have to handle it diplomatically and professionally. And if you don't, that can lead to some resistance that you might get from healthcare leaders that are ignoring you. And there are some reasons behind that that we'll explore in this training. Weak relationship dynamics. So that's another one where, if the compliance officer doesn't have a solid relationship built on rapport and trust with the leaders, then they're going to be resistant to compliance. And that's going to lead to that sort of overall lack of trust, that they're not completely unsure what your intentions are. They think you're out there to play gotcha with them or catch them making a mistake and embarrass them or something like that. So these are really all the things that kind of lead to that perception of being an obstacle or the grown-up version of a hall monitor. And so I continued to think about this and what could I do to try and address these things and try and get my leaders more engaged to me. And then it dawned on me what the solution was. And that was, if I want them to be engaged to the compliance program, then I first have to be engaged to them operationally. And I just wasn't. And so what I did was I started to lean in and take an active interest in my leaders and get to know them as a person, get to understand their challenges, their pain points. And when I did that, things completely changed. They started to listen to me. They started reaching out to me proactively with questions instead of reactively. I started getting invited to their meetings because they wanted my advice and input before they started to launch a new service line, for example, or enter into a proposed deal. And just overall, I started to feel more connected to them. I started to feel more like I was a member of the team, and I felt more respected. And so I'm super excited to share this framework with you today in hopes that it helps you going forward. And so when it comes to changing the perception of compliance in your organization, there really are 5 key steps, and we're going to walk through each of these. The first one is do your homework. And probably I could say it a little bit nicer and just say maybe do your due diligence. And so a couple of things with that is just make sure you know your audience. What are their challenges? What are their pain points? What are their priorities? What is their background? What is their expertise? What are the types of questions they might be asking me? Those are all things that are demonstrating knowing your audience. And when you take the time to make sure that you think about something from the perspective of your audience and not as the compliance officer, that will dramatically improve your relationship with your healthcare leaders. Also, know how decisions are made in the organization. Let's say, for example, I'm working in compliance and I work for an organization that bills out to Medicare and Medicaid, and we've discovered that we've got a large Medicare overpayment that we're going to have to refund. And now I need to go tell the CEO about it. Well, because it's finance related and billing related and revenue related, I know that the CEO is going to ask me if I've talked about this with the CFO and what the CFO's response was. So I need to be prepared for that question and with that answer. And what I would do in that particular case is either I would make sure I've vetted it with the CFO first and talk through it, and then bring that information to the meeting, or I might invite the CFO to the meeting so the 3 of us could dialogue through it together. But that's what I'm talking about when I say know how decisions are made in the organization. And if you are at a point where you're having a discussion with the decision maker, trying to anticipate what information that decision maker is going to need before they're going to make a decision. And that's all part of doing that homework. And then just be curious about their operations and lean in, find out processes from A to B, what the workflows are, how they interact with other departments. In my experience, healthcare leaders love to brag about their departments. And so a couple tips here that might help you is do a department walkthrough or do shadowing, or just pick up the phone and say, hey, I'd really like to learn more about what it is that you do in a time when there isn't an actual compliance issue. And doing that will actually help you build rapport with that particular leader. But it also goes towards demonstrating your homework. Okay, step 2 is be mindful of the knowledge gap. Something that I've learned the hard way is that healthcare leaders are just not as knowledgeable about the rules as you are. And so what I've learned is that sometimes you just have to take a step back and explain terminology and concepts that you might not otherwise have to think about. And a tip here that might help you is if you're going into a discussion with a leader about a particular topic and they may not be completely up to speed on the topic or understand the terminology, then just explain it to them as if they're somebody off the street or you're going into a first grade class. And when you go through that process mentally, it does help you take it down to a very basic level. Okay, step 3 is anticipate their questions. And so what you want to do is look at this issue from their point of view. What are their priorities? What are their challenges? What are their pain points? Those kinds of things. And when you do that, you'll kind of start to identify certain questions that will come up that you want to make sure you have the answers to when you go into that discussion with the leader. So for example, if you're investigating a matter or something like that, they're going to want to know what happened, what led to this particular issue, what steps are being taken to correct it, what steps are being taken to prevent it from happening in the future. How does this impact their staff? How does this impact their budget? Are there going to be billing delays? Do we need to remove somebody from the schedule? Those kinds of things are the questions that you're going to want to anticipate and make sure you've got answers at the ready before you meet with your healthcare leader. Step 4, focus on how the work benefits them. And I should put ... and not you. And so here what you want to do is just make sure you're highlighting the operational, strategic, reputational, I probably should add in financial impact to the organization. And so you want to use examples or terminology that is relatable to your audience and not be focused so much on the compliance jargon or the regulatory gobbledygook, to use a technical term. And so let me give you an example here. So let's say there's a data breach in the organization and I need to do an investigation. I need to go in and brief my senior leadership team about it. I don't want to go in and talk about high tech and all the factors that go into a risk assessment analysis and things like that. Instead, what I want to do is talk about how this is going to impact the organization. From a financial standpoint, obviously, we might have potential fines and penalties if the OCR comes in and does an investigation and there are findings. There also is going to be costs related to how you're going to handle that data breach. From a reputation standpoint, in my experience, patients tend to lose trust in organizations that can't handle their protected health information. And so there is the potential of some reputational damage on the organization. So that's the kind of thing you want to focus in on. What is going to be the operational impact to it, not so much how it's going to impact your particular role as the investigator. Okay, step 5, when you bring a problem, bring a solution too. What I've learned as a general rule is that healthcare leaders do not like surprises. And I think that's true whether you're going in to tell them about a potential large repayment or a drug diversion or employee theft or something like that, or it's one of their direct reports telling about a clinical care mistake that impacted patient care. And so what you want to do is be aware of that, first of all. And then when you do go in to have a discussion with your leader about the issue, you want to package your communication up. You want to explain to the leader what occurred and then also what your proposed steps are to resolve the matter and then prevent a future occurrence. And that relates to what I was talking about earlier of anticipating questions. So there's a little bit of overlap between these two steps. But when you go through this process, it will improve your ability to interact with your leader because you're demonstrating to them that you've thought about this from their perspective, not just you as the compliance officer. Okay, so that is the framework for changing the perception of compliance. First, do your homework. Be mindful of the knowledge gap, anticipate their questions, focus on how your work benefits them, and when you bring a problem, bring a solution too. Now, why is this framework going to help you change the perception of compliance? Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, and this is really true with all the steps that are included, is you're demonstrating respect for your leaders. Largely because you're seeing things from their perspective. It's not that you're ignoring your perspective, but you're also taking into account their perspective. And that's going to help you genuinely build stronger relationships with them, which is going to lead to credibility and trust as you move forward. And they'll start to reach out to you more proactively. It's also going to be demonstrating being a business partner to leadership and not an obstacle. And then relatedly, it's just going to shift that focus from policing over to partnership. And that's changing that perception of this is the Department of No to a business partner who is actually looking out for my best interest and the interest of the organization. and making sure that we make the best business decision. And so I want to make sure and reach out to that individual to help guide my decisions. So if you like this training, stay tuned. I have a more complete program that's going to help you with changing the perception of compliance. What we went through is a subset of a larger program that I have available. Now, if you're not interested, then certainly feel free to click out of this training. I do want to thank you for taking the time to go through this training. And again, if there's anything I can do to help you down the road, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, if you did decide to stay, then I want to introduce you to a new online course that I have available called How to Successfully Sell Compliance to Healthcare Leaders. It's really a step-by-step guide to help you authentically change the perception of compliance in your organization from obstacle to business partner. And what I'm doing is taking 25 years of my experience in interacting with various healthcare leaders on compliance matters and distilling it down to information that's going to help you move forward a lot quicker in your particular career, at least a lot quicker than I did. So what you'll get when you sign up for the training. So there's 6 modules, there's 25 lessons, and I've got a couple bonus modules that I'll talk about here in just a little bit. And it is a self-study course, so you can work on it at your own pace. The biggest thing I want to point out here is the lifetime access to the course materials. So unlike a webinar or a conference that you might attend where the information is delivered in sort of a one and done approach, that's not going to be the case with a course. So you'll always have access to the course for as long as it's available. And so what that means is as I make updates and as there are new tools added or possibly new modules, you're going to get access to the information as well, and you're not going to lose out. I really just want to make sure that this is a value add to you for signing up for the course. Okay, so let's go through some modules. The first one is understanding your political landscape. Now, I kind of scratched the surface on this a little bit earlier, but this is really going to do a deep dive on the politics of healthcare and why it's political and how compliance fits into it, how to develop what I like to call a neutral political strategy within the organization to help navigate that compliance program through a sea of political self-interests. And by that, of course, I mean corporate politics, not actual politics. And so the key here is by going through this module, you're going to have a better understanding of the why behind the decisions that your leaders are making. And that's going to put you in a better position to be able to come up with solutions that are going to be tailored to your leaders' particular interest in making sure that you have that business agenda and the compliance program agenda aligned. Module 2 is how to think like a healthcare leader. Okay, we talked about this a little bit earlier. There are times when you're going to need to take off your compliance officer hat and think like a healthcare leader. This module is going to help you do that. We're going to go through several different types of common healthcare leaders, look at their roles and responsibilities, what sort of things shape their particular point of view, and then most importantly, how do you position the compliance program to appeal to that particular leader's point of view? So it's going to be an effort of trying to climb inside the head of your healthcare leader so that you understand them a little bit better. Module 3 is going to build off Module 2 by now talking about how to build strong relationships with your leaders. And so I've got several strategies in here to help you authentically establish rapport with them. So this isn't going to be surface level conversations about who won the big game or what the weather's outside. I'm going to give you some specific strategies on how to really truly connect with your leaders. And then also some strategies for building and maintaining trust that are going to be through actions and not words. So that's what we cover in Module 3. Module 4 is going to cover diplomacy to influence behavior. As a compliance officer, we fortunately have the position where we can influence the actions of others within the organization. And as I said earlier, you have a compliance message of either do this or don't do that, but you can't quite say it like that. And you need to say it in a way that is asserting your ideas and opinions, but you're doing it in a respectful manner. And that is if you want to get engagement to your compliance program. So I'm going to give you some overall strategies on how to communicate more diplomatically with your leaders, but then also very specific strategies on communicating with healthcare leaders and physicians, because I know those two particular audiences can be challenging when it comes to talking about compliance matters. Okay, Module 5 is related to how you work through conflict. So oftentimes compliance can get thrown in the middle of conflict. So for example, there's a regulatory change and there needs to be an operational process that is adjusted. You've got 2 different departments involved. It's going to require some new documentation that has to go in the patient's medical record. And each department's looking at the other one saying it's the other department that actually owns the work for this. So you need to have a blueprint for how do you consistently work through that conflict and bring about resolution. And so that's what Module 5 is going to cover. Module 6 is going to wrap up by talking through some professional communication strategies. And so these are going to now be specific to the compliance officer role and some of the challenges that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so there's a number of different lessons within this particular module talking about different circumstances, such as avoiding gotcha moments or how to deliver bad news. And so the goal of this module is to give you the tools that you need to more effectively communicate with your leaders about compliance related matters. Okay, there's a couple bonus modules that I've included. One is called Library, the other one's called Tools of the Trade. And really, what's included are just a bunch of different tools that are going to help you carry out some of the strategies that are included in the other 6 modules. And so I put some examples up there. This is an area where I was talking about earlier that I am continually adding things to the course. And so this is where you're going to find some additional resources pop up down the road. Okay, so what are you going to get out of this particular course? Well, you're going to get professional communication strategies that are going to lead to faster buy-in with your leaders. One of the things that I have found over the course of my career is they just don't teach you this skill when you're in school or you're just starting out as a compliance officer. And a lot of times you have to go through a version of trial and error. And so this is going to lead to faster buy-in from your leaders because I'm helping you with things like translating compliance speak into executive language or something that's going to resonate with your audience and going to get you quicker buy-in. Also, a repeatable system for authentically building stronger relationships with your leaders. And then lastly, guidance for addressing what I would call more challenging situations that we run into on a day-to-day basis, such as navigating resistance, workplace conduct, disengaged or defensive leaders, I would add to that. And so that's just an overview of what's included in the course and how it's going to help you change the perception of compliance in your organization. Okay, you've hung in there through this free training, so I want to make sure and reward you by extending some special offers to you. So with the course, first thing is you'll get $100 off the retail price. So it normally retails for $495. I'm going to drop that down to $395. So for the cost of a couple webinars, you'll have lifetime access to these course materials. You can also do a payment plan of $140 for 3 months. I'm also going to throw in 3 free 60-minute coaching calls with me. Now, we can do whatever you would like. We can have these as a Q&A session if there are particular issues you'd like to talk through or challenges that you're facing, or you want to set up some goals or some action plans or something like that. I'm happy to talk through that with you as well. And then I'm also going to throw in a free 30-day engagement action plan. Now, this is an action plan set up over 4 weeks with things that you can do each day throughout the week to help become more engaged with your operational leaders and get them more engaged to the compliance program. So when you sign up for the course, there is a link below that should be included in this email. You're going to see the sales page pop up. It doesn't have a countdown timer on this screenshot, obviously, but when you do click on the link, it'll have a countdown timer. So the offer is going to be good for 6 days. And then when it does expire, the offer does go away and it just goes back to the regular price. As I said, there is a payment option where you can either do pay in full or the payment plan. You'll save a little bit if you do the payment in full option, but I know compliance departments can have varying budgets and I want to make sure and appeal to each different type of budget. Okay, then once you advance through the screen, you'll come to the billing piece. We do take credit card or PayPal as another option. And then once you go through purchasing the course, you're automatically going to get an email confirmation from me that will give you instant access to the course and it'll include your login credentials. So what's the return on your investment? The first thing is it's going to reduce your learning curve. And the reason for that is because I'm eliminating a lot of the trial and error and taking some of that guesswork out on how to more effectively communicate with your leaders. I'm going to give you the strategies and give you the tools to do that. And that's going to help you adapt a lot quicker. Also, faster integration into your organization. So with the tools designed around building authentic relationships with your leaders and being more engaged with them, you're naturally going to integrate much quicker into your organization. And then that's also going to lead to improved alignment with leadership because now you're in a better position with these stronger relationships built on trust and credibility to be able to align the compliance program agenda and the business agenda in the organization. Okay, so imagine an ideal world where you feel appreciated, that your work is recognized, you feel like you're a member of the team and you're contributing and have a sense of accomplishment that you've been able to change the perception of compliance in your organization. And you're experiencing that because you have your leaders proactively reaching out to you instead of reactively. They're telling their staff to contact you ahead of time to vet a particular circumstance. Or maybe they're helping you champion a compliance program initiative. And so if that is your dream, I'm here to tell you it can be your reality because I have experienced both sides of the equation. And the reason why I created this course is to help newer compliance professionals like you reduce their learning curve. And that's it. So I did include my contact information here. If you have any questions, whether it's about the course or anything else, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. I do lastly want to say thank you very much for taking the time to go through this training. I hope that it was helpful to you, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.